Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. In this lesson, we are now focusing on chapter 2, which is all about the chemical level of organization. But before we start, let's talk about the lesson objectives. So, after this chapter, you will describe you will be able to describe the fundamental composition of matter. Should we also identify the three subatomic particles? What are those? We also can identify the four most abundant elements in the body, explain the relationship between an atom's number of electrons and its relative stability. We should be able also to distinguish about ionic bonds, covalent bonds, and hydrogen bonds. And we should be able to explain how energy is invested, how energy is stored, or how energy is released via chemical reactions, especially those reactions that are essential to life. We should be also able to explain the importance of inorganic compounds, what do they use, what are they used for in everyday life, such as water, salts, acids, and bases. And we should be also be able to compare and contrast the four different classes of organic compounds, which are proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids, according to their composition and functional importance to human life. Okay, so let's get started with our first lesson on this chapter. So our study begins with matter, which is everything that takes up space and mass. And of course, matter is made of elements, and elements are made up of atoms. Take note that atoms are the smallest units of matter that still retain the properties of an element. Okay, next. We have the elements of the human body. Of course, before we can understand anatomy and physiology, we need to start at a very small possible level. It is even smaller than this, which is at the atomic level. But let's talk first about the chemical level of organization. Okay, so everything in the human body, from our bones to blood to brain cells, everything in our body is built from elements. And element is a pure substance that cannot be broken. It cannot be easily broken into different substances by ordinary chemical means. And take note that each element is made of only one type of atom, even though there are 92 naturally occurring elements on Earth. And the human body is surprisingly simple in terms of what it uses. And 96%, which is this, 96% of your body weight is only four elements, which are nitrogen, 3% of it is nitrogen, hydrogen, it's 10% of it, carbon, 18%, and most of your body is built of oxygen. Then we have other elements such as calcium on the bones, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, sodium, chlorine, magnesium, and other elements like boron and iodine and tin and zinc and other things like that. While oxygen is the most abundant, which is 65% of our body, because since our body is made up of water, so we have what we call H2O, and since our body a major component is water, so oxygen has a major component of it, and many other organic molecules. Next, we have carbon, the second most abundant in our body, that has 18.5% or 18% or 19%. And carbon is very important as it forms as a backbone to all of the organic compounds. Every organic compound has a carbon in it. And inorganic compounds are compounds without carbon in it. So an example of an inorganic compound that doesn't have any carbon is water or oxygen, since it's H2O and CO2. Inorganic also table salt like NaCl. And also next, the third most abundant is hydrogen, which is also essential, especially in water and in energy transfer. And nitrogen. So nitrogen is also the fourth most abundant with 3.2%, which is very critical for proteins and DNA. So DNA contains nitrogen, okay? And beyond these four, the body also relies on other elements such as calcium, phosphorus, potassium, sodium, chlorine, iron, magnesium, and those are essential but present in smaller amounts. And there's also some copper, zinc, manganese, fluorine, and even these elements, as you can see, it's less than 1.0. They are still very, very vital to our body. A deficiency in trace elements can still lead to serious health problems. So, the key idea of the elements of the human body is life depends on a small set of elements, but every one of them plays a critical role. Okay? Next, let's talk about the two models of atomic structure. So we have two models, the planetary model and the electron cloud model. But before we start that, to understand, so we need to understand an atomic structure. So an atomic structure, so atoms are made of three important subatomic particles. So I'm gonna use this example here. So as you can see here, we have first subatomic particle is the protons. So these are the positively charged particles. And next one is we have neutrons. These are the particles without a charge. And we also what we call the electrons, which are negatively charged, which is right just like here. Electrons are found in the outer cloud on the outer part, and protons and neutrons can be found in the center of it. Okay. Okay. So there are two major ways scientists visualize atomic structure. So first of all is the planetary model. So here. So this is the planetary model of a helium. So in this model, electrons orbit the nucleus in fixed circular paths, just like how planets orbit the sun. So think of it like the sun. This is the sun, and this is the earth. And the electrons, or the earth, moves around the sun. So this is the planetary model. Planetary, it looks like a planet orbiting. So this model is used in simple, useful for basic learning, especially in our subject, which is anatomy and physiology. Next is the electron cloud model. So this model is more accurate. So more accurate. So instead of fixed paths in this planetary model, electrons move rapidly in regions in what we call the electron cloud. So this blue here, this is what we call the electron cloud. And these clouds are present in areas where electrons are most likely to be found. So in this area, electrons move rapidly. It goes in random positions, but it's still on this radius of the cloud. And the nucleus located on the center of the atom. Nucleus are the protons and neutrons together. And this accounts the atom's mass. Even though that the electrons are very very small, they are still very important because it determines how atoms interact to form bonds. So remember this, chemical behavior depends mostly on electrons, not the nucleus. Okay, next let's talk about the periodic table of elements. So all known elements are organized in this table. So um I suggest to have a copy of a periodic table because it is one of the most important tools in science. And each element are identified by a chemical symbol, which is this, like H, like Li. The big part of it is what we call the chemical symbol. Then we also have the atomic number, which equals to the number of protons, like how many protons can be seen on the atomic structure. So it can be seen on the topmost part. So let's have cerium, for example. So this part is what we call C, where we can see the atomic number. Next is the atomic mass, which reflects the average mass of the element's isotope, and it can be seen right here. This is the atomic weight or the atomic mass. They are the same. And the atomic number is critical as it defines the element. Like for example, hydrogen always have one proton. So as you can see here, hydrogen here has one proton. Meanwhile, carbon always has 6 protons. Since the atomic number of carbon is 6, and if the number of protons changes, the element changes. So if we add another proton into carbon, which is not possible, by it, hypothetically, it can turn into nitrogen. Just like that. So the periodic table is arranged in that elements with similar chemical properties line up in the same columns or groups. Like for example, this is group 1. This is what we call the alkali met alkali metals, I think. But if correct me if I'm wrong. So it's like in groups. So this group is this. So this is the lanthanides. This is the anthodites. Just like that. Okay, so this organization of the elements helps the scientists how elements will behave chemically, but in anatomy and physiology, the periodic table helps us understand why the certain bonds why certain elements bonds very easy, why some elements form ions, and why other elements are relatively inert. Next, we have isotopes. So let's talk about isotopes. So all atoms of the same element have the same number of protons, but those elements can differ in the number of neutrons, which are atoms. So when we have the different number of neutrons but the same number of protons, so we have different isotopes. So for example, this is hydrogen. So all of these are hydrogens, and let's let's talk about hydrogen. So um, this is hydrogen. So it has one proton and no neutrons, and that's what we call the protium. So it doesn't have any neutron, but it has one proton. And this one has one proton and one neutron. Now, since they have the same amount of protons, they are still hydrogen. But the only thing differs is the number of neutrons. This is still hydrogen, but has a different atomic weight. So this is called deuterium. Next, we have one proton and two neutrons. So this is still hydrogen, but it's called tritium. So chemically, isotopes behaves almost the same, but the only thing differs to it is um is the mass. And some isotopes are stable, while other isotopes are radioactive, meaning they break down over time and release energy. Radioactive isotopes are very useful in medicine, especially in imaging, which we talked about last topic, and cancer treatments, which leads us in this next slide. By the way, the most abundant of these three isotopes of hydrogen is deuterium. One proton, one neutron. So let's talk about this. So this is the uses of isotopes. We talked about this last lesson with positron emission tomography. So important medical application of it is the PET scan or position emission tomography. So in a PET scan, a patient is given a substance that contains a radioactive isotope, which is often attached to glucose, since active tissues like cancer cells uses lots of glucose, and these areas absorb more of the radioactive material. And as those isotopes break down, it releases energy and it is detected by the scanner, which produces a detailed metabolic image. A detailed image of metabolic activity in the body. So this is why we can see on a PET scan those different how those different functions, the different functions of our body, how our body works. So um, take note of this. PET scans or PET scans are useful for detecting cancer, for tracking the spread of tumor, for evaluating brain function, and for studying heart metabolism. There are even more and more uses of this, and we might talk about it in the next couple of videos. So, atomic structure is not just theoretical, it directly affects medical diagnosis and treatment. Next, last one, electron shells. So these are essential and critical for understanding chemical bonding, as electrons occupy specific energy levels around the nucleus, which is called electron shells. So this is example of electron shells, and these shells fill in a predictable pattern. The first shell can hold up 2 electrons. The second shell can hold up to 8 electrons, which is right here. And the third shell in basic biology also holds up to 8 electrons, and the most important shell, which is the outermost shell, also called as the valence shell. The number of electrons in the valence shell determines how reactive an atom is. And let's say, for example, hydrogen. It has 1 electron and a half-filled shell, making it very reactive. Helium, which has 2 electrons and a full shell. Since the first shell can only fit 2 atoms, the helium atom is stable and inert. Next, we have carbon. Carbon has 4 atoms on the valence shell. Since this second shell can hold up into 8 atoms, this carbon can still be bonded and able to form many bonds, which makes it highly versatile since it needs many um, electrons to be stable. Next, for example, is neon, which does not occur naturally in the body but has a full valence shell and does not react. It is stable. So atoms with full valence shells are stable, and atoms with incomplete valence shells tend to form chemical bonds and achieve stability. So this concept is essential because every chemical bond in the human body exists due to valence electrons. So that's it for this lesson, this video. So of course, naturally, I will give a heads up for the next lesson. So in the next lesson, we will talk about chemical bonds. So we will talk about different chemical bonds, specifically ionic bonds, nonpolar covalent bonds, polar covalent bonds, and hydrogen bonds. Okay, so we will talk about that next meeting, and I will see you in the next one. Have a nice day and see ya.